Good morning, good afternoon, good day to you wherever you may be. Welcome to the Motoring Historian. My name is John Summers, and I'm here again with my school friend Mark Gammy. Say hello, Mark.
Hello, Mark.
Um, all right, so without further ado, since we always talk a lot, let's have a look at our little agenda. And we were going to talk about Pebble Beach, weren't we?
So, what was your take home from it? Then you went there for the few days. You saw all the stuff. You hung around with the Richies. What was your take? What was your highlight of the event?
My highlight of the event was the morning of the tour. I went down with Ollie, my son. He's now, and we've been once before, but this time he sort of knew what to do. In terms of that, you were like mingling with the cars and maybe taking some photos, and he knew what he was doing this time. Um, when we went before, um, he had less of an idea of so this time, right? I mingled with all the people I wanted to. He behaved extremely well for that, and listened and didn't wander off and get in other people's way and all of that kind of thing, which is the normal reason why small kids can't go to those kind of events. Anyway, you know what the tour's like, where all the cars drive out under that hoarding, and there's zillions of photographers, professional photographers that are wanting to get paid for their photographs being there. And I guess this time, I mean, I'm not sure how well you remember it, but normally they used to turn right out of there. With this time, they were turning left. So because that was different and the police closed the road off in a different way, there was more than the usual amount of jostling and sharp elbows. And Ollie and I were a little late on the scene. And I realized as we crossed over the road that there was nowhere for us to stand, but Ollie could stand at the front, in front of the photographers, below their height where they were standing, as long as I went to the back. So I communicated that to him, communicated that to some very rude photographers, and then left him at the front, knowing, trusting him to just stand at the front and watch the cars off. So I was like at the back, but communicating with him, and I was by an NBC, like one of those NBC E350s that they have with the boom on the top of it that was doing filming. And I didn't really pay attention to the other people that I was stood next to, because I was like looking through like the side of the, where the van's door was open. I was like looking through the crack in the door to like to see Ollie's little Ferrari hat, to make sure he was where I left him and he was watching away. Um, and I realized I was standing next to Derek Hill, who's the master of ceremonies and whose dad is still the only American born Formula One world champion for Ferrari, no less. And, a guy who supported Pebble for a really long time, and an all round nice guy, much too nice a guy to be a top racing driver, Phil Hill. That's the bottom line. Much too much of a car lover to be the kind of person who tore up a racing car. In later years, he was very much involved in the Pebble Beach show and restored cars, and the cars that he had tend to be really, interesting ones. He learned to drive on his mother's Pierce Arrow. He never lost his love for those kind of those kind of interwar Gatsby era American classics that are beloved of the Pebble Beach crowd. So yeah, so I was next to his son, who's about my age, and I said to him, not quite what I just said to you, but I said, that I respected his dad, and yeah, I didn't gush in the way that I did when I met Lars Ulrich when I was about 25. It wasn't like that. Um, but I said something to him, and we had a nice little backwards and forwards conversation about, well, you know what it was about, right? I have, I was wearing these terrible pair of Tiger, you know, I wouldn't say trainers. They're more just, they're like tennis shoes, aren't they? Kind of. But those Onitsuka Tigers, they're about my third pair. And the pair that I have at the moment, well, my wife's like, you can't wear those. And I was like, well, there's nothing else. And she went, well, they're terrible. You have to like, you should buy new shoes. Like, anyway, so I was kind of embarrassed of my shoes because, you know, they always say you can judge how wealthy a bloke is by his shoes. And by that measure, I look like the pauper I am, right? So that doesn't always jive properly at Pebble, but I'm like, whatever. I'm just doing me this time. I'm going with Ollie. I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. So Derek Hill goes, I like your shoes. I go, oh, really? My wife hates them. And he goes, ah, really? And then he puts his foot next to mine. And I realize that he's got the same shoe as me. And his are much newer and nicer, but he's got the same shoe as me. So we compare shoes a little bit. And then Ollie comes over because the first batch of cars has gone, and he's wearing like Ferrari cap and shirt. So Derek Hill engages him, and Ollie is, you know, as behaves as one would hope a 8-year-old boy would when meeting, you know, old bloke who's going to chit chat about Ferrari. And old Hill turns to me and says, interesting conversation we had. I like the way you tell a story. Let me take your name and email address. I may get in touch with you. So I gave him a name and email address, and he said, your boy's better behaved than mine, and then went on his way to do his piece for NBC. Yeah, so I guess that's the first thing that came to mind for me for a fun moment. Let me share a more automotively focused moment with you as well. Do you remember Laurelese Grade, that road that goes up over the hill from near Laguna Seca and then down the other side? And you may know that I know that road quite well since I stay there now, or the last couple of years I've stayed near there, and I've also done, you know, journalist test drive stuff along that road. So I'm not, you know, I'm pretty confident along there. So I used the E55 for the job this year, and at the foot, when I turned off 68 to go right the way over the top, at the foot of the grade, there was a car, probably a pair of tail lights, probably 300 yards in front of me. This is about, no, 11:30 at night, late at night, empty road, clear, good weather. And he was about, and in the lower section, you can go really fast, like, you know, uh, uh, really fast. And yeah, absolutely. And so that's what I did. Um, and it's only with hindsight that you realise that it was surprising that I didn't catch the pair of taillights at that point. But as the road became twistier, I caught up the pair of taillights, and it was a Rimac Nevera. I kid you not. Now this was, and when it gets really twisty towards the top before the descent. Well, on the descent, dude, he couldn't leave me. I knew the road. I was all the way. Well, once it got straight down towards Bernardus, he got a bit of a gap on, but and then on the entry to Bernardus, he stopped to see me by, right? Because I was probably 100 yards back by that point, and he was turning left into Bernardus. And I kid you not, I mean, the satisfaction that it gave me when a 20-year-old E55 with rust on the sunroof, he couldn't put a gap between that and his 2,000 horsepower Rimac. That amused me somewhat. I guess my thought on it is that I must have known the road somewhat better than him.
Yeah.
A little agenda of Pebble, and we were just talking about the Rimac there. I was really struck by the number of modern supercars there were. Um, and talking with other people within the actual Pebble community, um, I think there's almost a subculture of Pebble Beach Car Week people emerging, and it's it's okay. So I was parked up in my little spot on Carmel Valley Road. You know the spot.
Mhm.
I was parked up there doing, sitting by the side of the road, watching the cars come by, and the old, Juan's gardening service dropped a cone off the back of his pickup truck, and it's there lying in the road, and I can see it in the rear view, and all these cars coming up the hill, they can't see it, and everybody knows it's that test route, right? And I'm looking at it, and it's about 2 yards into one carriageway, so it's not right in the road, but it's blocking it. It's making that carriageway very narrow, right on a bend. So I'm thinking, wow, there could be a head on here if somebody makes a bad decision about placing the car coming up the hill and swerves around this thing a lot. Then so they could head on somebody because they could go over the yellow line, or if somebody slows down and there's somebody else who's test driving a Lucid or a McLaren up the hill here, they're they could potentially be doing autobahn kind of speeds. So anyway. So I hopped out of the E55, trotted over, moved the cone, and as I moved the cone, I kid you not, 24 McLarens came by, and I'm like, you know, they weren't making cars 10 years ago, right? That's why there's and similarly, Lamborghinis, so many Gallardos, so many Hurricanes, particularly, so many even Aventados, the stuff, so much stuff that has been made in just the last 10 years, 10 or 15 years, since I don't know, I want to say since the Audi takeover in the case of Lamborghini. But yeah, there seems to be and those people aren't coming to the Pebble Beach car show itself. So I feel like there's a whole subculture of Pebble Beach developing that must exist for shows and events, for people between the age of 18 and 40. And I feel like I'm doing the events for the people between 40 and 140.
Yeah, I think you're definitely not with the Fast and Furious crew in their pimpmobiles outside. It must be said. But I mean, look, it's I think anything like that, if I understand you correctly, sort of gathers sort of subcultures and stuff as it becomes wide. I mean, that thing's obviously been known around for ages, but as it gets more exposure and it's live streamed on YouTube and all these sort of stuff, it sort of becomes a bit of a broader event for people to engage in, I suppose. So it's more people turn up, more people sort of doing their own thing around it. But
Shelby Ferrari 410, the red one that's numbered 98 that RM had. Dude, I was like, that's great. Like, that's the one. That's the
yeah,
one. I wonder how much
it's
it
kind of
is,
lure, isn't it?
And then as you approach, you're like, dude, that is a big capacity Ferrari sports car from the late 50s. So that is a big money car all day long. The estimate was 25 to 27. So I think it's sold for 22.
Yeah, I don't have trouble believing.
It's kind of a bargain. Next to that 140
Yeah,
$42 million Uhlenhaut coupe was a bargain.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But let's have a little look at Gooding.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
What caught your eye there?
Um,
I'm just scrolling through Gooding results. So I've got as far as lot 18 that if purely from my heart, regardless of values, that was the car that I was absolutely and completely in love with. The picture there doesn't do its faded glory any kind of justice. It was the paint was so faded off that I loved the red, and that black interior was more tired than the interior of my E55. But it was
So this is the 400 GT2
this,
plus 2 Lambo,
yeah, absolutely, yeah, the Lamborghini 400 GT, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'm just looking at
I mean,
the picture of it now, from the old Gooding website, and my word, what an awesome car! Love that.
yeah, there's some nice stuff there. A lot of Porsches.
A lot of
Um,
Porsches, a lot of roofs. A sense that they're trying to, and yeah, a sense with the roofs particularly that they're trying to create a sort of rarefied market for Porsches. You know what I mean? It's like when Ducati do a version of the bike that has the really expensive wheels and suspension on it, and they're only going to do 100 of them. You know what I mean? They're deliberately trying to create something that's a collector vehicle. And I feel that by packaging, I'm looking at lots 4 and 5. I feel that by packaging lot 4 alongside lot 5, I feel like lot 5, the 1990 car, is collectible. I feel like lot 4, I don't know. I mean, it hammered for more than lot 5, I guess, because it's rarer. But that I don't know. I yeah, the collectible Porsche market, I can't pretend to understand. Yeah, I'm looking here. I'm amazed.
no, I mean, I'd have had the cheapest Porsche. I'd have had the 2004 GT3 996 and saved lots of money.
Well, it's funny looking round. That was the car that that I liked.
You forget how long the chin overhang is, don't you? Like,
Yeah, and the people hate on the nine nine sixes now, but that's a great looking car. That lot 10, where
yeah,
it really is. And you're right that next to the others,
yeah.
it's a real bargain. Um, yeah, and the roof thing is it's investor money gone silly. I mean,
Well, and also like because you got to remember that on Gran Turismo they didn't have the Porsche license, but they had the RUF license, so therefore you could have a rough GT, CTR two and things like that, but you couldn't have a 911 for quite a long time. So that was the only way you get these in the game.
I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah, man. Gran Turismo law there for you.
The other thing that Ollie and I spent a long time hanging around was, if you scroll down to lots 56, 58, and 59, some guy was
Mm-hmm.
basically having a race car collection liquidized, and there were some awesome cars. He had this lot 58, this Bud March 85, that evolved into the Porsche 956 designed by Adrian Newey. And this AAR All American Racers Gurney Indy car. Um, that was you look at the picture there, the little thumbnail image on Gooding's website here, and it looks like a cool old car. You stand next to it, it's like a UFO. It's like a 200-mile-an-hour land-born UFO. Really, an awesome.
A lot of the structure, when you look at it from the side, is engine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's cheap, man. 112K, 112 grand for that. That's not
yeah.
bad.
Because it's hard to enjoy.
True, true.
Yeah.
I mean, it is essentially a complete toy, um, and probably undrivable on most of the circuits in the world because they have noise limits, which it would break.
Well, I was thinking that if it's truly an Indy car, it's probably set up to only turn left. So it means that So for me, right, I would do collectible NASCARs, but I would only want to do it. I would only want to collect road course cars, because I've never driven on ovals, so it would be impossible for me to enjoy a car that had been set up for a super speedway. You just to me, if that car's been set up for
Yeah.
Indy, you're like dehistoricizing it to take it away from Indy. If it had been set up for road course and it looked like that, I looked closely at it and it seemed, as if it had equal, suspension arms and things like that. Um, at that point, but again, to enjoy it, right, you need a hauler, you need to go to a particular event, you need probably a mechanic. If not, you need to be really good yourself and have a lot of time to spend on it. It's a much harder car to enjoy than that lot 60 that's next to it, that Gullwing. You can take that to a Cars and Coffee. You can take your wife out to dinner in that, if
Yeah,
if it's in a nice place and you've got a nice place
I
to
take your
park.
point. But like, there's a bit of a gap between the two price wise. Isn't there?
Well, yes, but that's why I mean, and that's a really nice example of a Gullwing, isn't it? I'm not sure if it's an aluminium body one there. It's got
Yeah,
the Rudge wheels and the silver makes it but no, I think that's why racing cars generally, historic racing cars, are often far cheaper than you think, because finding an environment to enjoy them is really hard.
true that. Yeah. Now there's some nice stuff here, and there's stuff where you think that's I mean, it's got plenty to go. I mean, I'm no expert on the used car market, but just by the sort of gut feels, I mean, that 1990 M3 looks like about where you expected to go for, but yeah, I think there's some appreciation in there over the next 10
What lot
years.
is
But
that
I mean, who
M3?
knows? 108.
We
I
we
like
looked
that
at we looked
1950
at that.
gun.
Ollie and I looked at that car. He liked the car, and the car was cosmetically not perfect. It felt to me
Maybe that's
like that was a car that was part of a collection, which David Gooding had to sell all of them rather than that one, because that car didn't meet the sort of presentation standards that he might normally have. Some of the trim was faded on it. I'm saying that like I'm a Pebble Beach judge. Obviously, that made the car far more appealing to me, because it felt drivable.
Mm.
It felt like it had been driven and it felt drivable.
I mean, dude, I mean, lately I get to, I'm a right old bugger with this sort of stuff. If it can't be driven regularly, I'm not interested in it. Like, I'm interested in it from a point of view of like, the sort of stuff you see in museums and things, and like it's nice to know that they're still around. And if I ever rich enough to buy that sort of stuff, and then lucky enough to be able to rinse it at Goodwood, I will definitely do so, um, because that's what they're for. So it's but that depends on the type of car, doesn't it? But so I always end up looking at the stuff like that and then going like, cool. But if I had the money, it'd be nice to go to lunch in the 3500 GT Maserati. That'd be pretty cool. So it'd be nice to have that sort of like thing to cruise around in. But I mean, it's this, yeah, it's like a kid in a sweet shop. There's so much stuff that you could have. It's amazing.
My philosophy is to split the stuff that you have to drive, from the stuff that's purely collectible, because there is something, um, you know glorious about something like a dragster, which can only run on nitromethane, and it needs a full rebuild after you run it. um these are magnificent machines, and there should be room in the corner of the barn to keep these things. There's
Yeah, for real. I mean, that's fair enough. Those top fuel things are just crazy.
So my version of that is sports bikes and Suzuki GSX-Rs particularly, and I that is why I've thought a lot about this idea of things being hard to enjoy, because Gixxers are hard to enjoy on the road. most of them can do 100 miles an hour in first gear. So that makes them a hard thing to enjoy, and I lack the skill to enjoy them properly on the track, and it leaves you in this place of feeling, well, there really is no place for them, yet they remain absolutely glorious in their intersection of huge performance and super accessible price point. It's like the democratization of performance, and maybe that's why we were talking about the guys with the McLarens and the Lamborghinis. I think that's maybe why I wouldn't say I'm snide about them, because I want everybody to enjoy the car hobby and automobiles and so on in their own way. But you do feel a little bit as if I would feel a little bit of poser in a Lamborghini when you can achieve. Let's just create a pause here whilst Dana gets her lunch in. You're not really a classic car person. You're like a driving person. I've always thought this about you. You're like a driving person who has the right, like a running person who has the right shoes for the job. The interest in cars is the same as the runner's interest in running shoes, in making sure he's got the right tool for the job. And classic cars are never going to be the best tool for the job. But here's the thing, when I had a small lump of money a while ago, I looked at buying a classic car. And the whole thing with it is that I'm not, I could have bought a nice-ish muscle car, but I just couldn't see myself like buying a deck chair and going to car shows and parking up and sitting in the deck chair and chit chatting with people about how it was a 5-speed now, but it had used to be a 3-speed, and no, it wasn't a big block, and and I'm just, I don't know, that's not where the hobby is for me. So I like the fact that different people do the hobby in different kinds of ways. If you want to have have a Mustang in your semi-detached house in the home counties of England, if you want to have a 60s automatic 289 Mustang, be my guest. It's not my thing, but be my guest. I do draw the line. I see people with that blobby era, that white car that we're looking at, my racing car, the 95, 94, 95, that kind of era, that blobby body style, those cars with 6-cylinder engines, for me, not collectible. With 8-cylinder engines, not to my taste, but collectible. I like my car because it's slammed and it's got the Cobra wheels on it, but it sort of needs those things. Without those things, they're a little bit like Capri 1.6s and Capri 1.3s. They're just, I love those cars in their ultimate form. And this is a interesting question. I asked a room full of design professionals at Stanford University, no less. I say a room full, I mean a table of people sitting around the table. Is the purest form of the Chevrolet Camaro the 6-cylinder rental car that you pick up at the airport, the convertible that everybody drives, that they make the most of, with the automatic transmission and the steel wheels and the tall tires? Is that the purest iteration of Camaro? Or is the purest iteration of Camaro the ZL1 with the supercharged 650 horsepower V8 and the stick shift and the look like it just fell out of the Transformers movie, because it just did? Which is the pure iteration of Camaro? And they said, always the most extreme one, because that's what the designer intended. That's what the designer had in mind when he thought of Camaro, he or she thought of Camaro, they thought of that extreme interpretation. They thought Z01, they thought Z28, they thought, black alloy wheels, not silver painted pressed steel ones.
I mean, yeah, so that's interesting. So do you think? I mean, because I never really considered which way round they do these. Because when you see concept car designs and you see design art studio people doing interpretations or gesture, and the thought experiments for manufacturers, even though they aren't working for them necessarily, as sort of like as much a CV effort, if you like, but still. They always do the cool version. It's very rare they'll do a homogeneous, dull box on the basis of that might be what it'd be dumbed down to. So you have to assume, therefore, that the designers don't change much when they become employed by the manufacturers, so that they do it that way around. I just never considered it because what a depressing process, taking something that you've just made epically cool and then just boring the crap out of it in order to make it a more sort of like steel wheel, sellable 50,000 unit shitbox in comparison to this gorgeous supermodel of a build that you've got in clay in the workshop that they won't build for 4 years because they've got to run out of enough metal to make enough money to justify your concept car.
So I met the bloke that was chief designer on the Volvo XC90, which not to my taste, but not, a great car and loved by other great cars. I mean, famously, Clarkson had 3 of them, didn't he, when he was a family man? So I can acknowledge these are a well-designed vehicle, even if they're not my thing. And I said to him, I asked him, when you see them on the road, is it like seeing one of your children? Do you feel like proud of it when you see it? And he said, honestly, no, because there's so many elements of it which have changed. I'm proud of what my team achieved, but I, equally, I see elements of it, of the design, and I'm not going to tell you what they are, which I really don't like. I see elements of the design that I feel I told you so about to my team, and that I can't say, I'm not going to say to you, and I wouldn't say to them either, but I know when I look at that car, there are those things. Now I met I can't remember the bloke's name, Japanese guy that designed the Nissan Leaf, and he was saying that until the sort of turn of the century, probably one person designed a car, but now it's really a committee designs a car. And really, they might say, oh, Dave Jones designed it, but really that's because Dave Jones is a handsome young guy and the firm feel that he's the right person to represent them in talking about the design ethos of the company. He didn't really design it. It's like the famous Bangle butt that Chris Bangle was the design lead, but it was actually Adrian von Hoyendijk, the guy who then went to Lamborghini, and I don't know where he is now, but it was him that actually did that design feature. It wasn't actually Chris Bangle at all. The fellow that designed the Leaf, he said that it changed in that. So does the Leaf, this, it changed from being a single person who had their stamp on a vehicle. So for him, the car that he feels is very much him is the 1980s Nissan Maxima, not the Nissan Maxima that you will remember, that crazy Texan perfume salesman having in the 1990s, which was a powerful
World Parfum.
I'm sorry?
That was the company, as I recollect.
Yeah, World Parfum. Yeah.
Well, fuck me. That's all right. Headline on Ars Technica on the cars page: Audi will build F1 engines entering the sport in 2026.
Didn't Audi didn't Volkswagen always say they never wanted to do Formula One because they felt that they were developing a technology that would have no reflection on their road cars. So my understanding was they never wanted to do Formula One because they were building lots of, that would mean building V6s or V8s or V10s. And that was not something that they wanted to do. Whereas now Formula One's doing 4-cylinder engines. It seems logical that Audi or VAG or whatever they're calling themselves now, PX organization, would be interested in doing
Yeah, it looks
in
like they're
doing
going to have
something
two
like
in there,
this.
Porsche and Audi.
Yeah, the designer of the Leaf, he said he designed the first generation Maxima, not that blobby one that World Parfum guy that we worked with in Richmond or Alabama or wherever, Richmond, Virginia or wherever it was all those decades ago. Not that 90s blobby Maxima, a squared off 80s version of that car, but with the same virtues as that car of the World Parfum guy that you'll remember, like, you know, American style appointments inside and a remarkable lick of speed for a fairly staid looking, you know, automatic sedan. Um, that so in the 80s you felt like it was your car when you were a designer. Into the 90s you lost that feeling, and you know, by the 20th century, maybe it had gone completely. And that ties into what we were talking about, you know, with Lucid a couple of weeks ago, that was a small design team that had a free hand to decide what they wanted to design, and they had this ethos of designing from the inside out. Um, and I know I also wanted to revisit a comment that we made in a previous pod about the shape being bland, the Lucid shape being bland. Um, it's wind cheating, so it has to be that way. What isn't bland is if you see the car at night, the headlight pattern is completely different from any other car. And that's something which has changed, and I think it's quite interesting, just in the last couple of years, is that car makers are looking to give themselves a brand identity in the shape of the headlights. For Rivian are doing it as well. They have a little oval, but car makers are increasingly giving themselves a brand identity through the headlight shape. And through the headlight shape, not in the day, at night, the way it projects at night. And I for one, think that's interesting and
I
futuristic
suppose
and
I was
cool.
thinking of the 991's wraparound taillight and those Maserati boomerang taillights on the 3200 that I so love that they then got rid of. But it's interesting when the manufacturers play with it a bit and do something a bit different. Sometimes it's not very well received, which is a bit of a shame because on reflection, like those Maserati lights, they were cool.
Yeah, the Maserati lights really were a thing. Those boomerang tail lights on those early Maserati coupes, 3200s,
I think they lost it for the 4200s, is
4200s.
a real
I
shame, but they
can't
had them from the
remember what they've got.
3200s definitely. Weird cars those because you get them in the grand sports. They've got an SMG only, but it's a paddle shift actual manual, if I recall.
That was the era of, I'm not sure if that car had it, but that was the era of sequential semi-automatic transmissions, wasn't it? You had two pedals, and you went up and down the gearbox like a motorcycle, where you had to be in every gear. I remember the Alpha GTA had that kind of gearbox. The Alpha 156, the hot rod version of that. You could get it with a
Oh,
stick, or you could get it with basically a sequential. It was a sequential. It acted like an automatic transmission in that it didn't have a clutch pedal, but you moved paddles to make it shift. Or with some cars, and I think this Alpha, you had like a touring car. You knocked the lever forward or you knocked it back to shift. Yeah.
Yeah, a few
Anyway,
of the cars will do that on the manuals. They have that sort of flip across from sort of the sort of up from R down to D and stuff on the left hand side. You can click it over and then bang it up and down, can't you?
yeah, this is different than on BMW than
Yeah,
on most cars, because most cars, that BMW system, the car still has a torque converter. I'm not sure if those Alfa Romeos had a conventional torque converter or if they just had a clutch like a motorcycle clutch, and a gearbox that was I think it may have been a different thing, but we don't know, so we're just whittling, aren't we? We've talked for ages here. You're just back from the Pyrenees or wherever you were in France with this spiffy new car. Like, how was the vacation?
very nice, thanks. And we've spoken briefly about it. Some of the highlights of the holiday, visiting the Nîmes amphitheatre and so forth, Roman Colosseum outside of Italy, fabulous. Still being used for entertainment, that was superb. But getting back to the car, yeah, I mean, it's nice. I mean, I've done I think 2,600 miles in it. Now, to be fair, most of that's peage, comfort mode, just tickling along, and it does that sort of middle weighty stuff. The car of just loping along and eating the miles pretty effectively. It's quite comfortable. I saw a review saying that the seats bite your ass after a while, but I didn't find that, so that was nice. And it looks decent. I've graunched the front left wheel even further, because when you've got a wife who's got a hip problem, you want to get as close to the little sort of petit bras leaning out the left-hand window with your little arms to get to the péage, pay on the thing, and pull the ticket out stuff. So you want to get as close as possible. So inevitably, with the different new car judging the wheel arches, and of course the wheel arches being extended out from the body shape by a couple of inches and to the front and 3 inches or whatever it is at the back, I made mistakes. So I need to have the wheels resprayed. But anyway, getting back to the meat of it, yeah, I like it. It's a nice car. It's weird in comfort mode because when you give it some beans, it's got a noticeable drop off in power about below 3,500 revs. So if you don't take it up to about 4.5, 5, it drops down to that 3.5. And then it's a little bit before it sort of picks back up again when the turbo scrolls up. So it's quick anyway, but that can make it almost feel a bit lurchy. So you sort of need to bang it into sport, and then give it the beans and remember that it'll happily rev up to about 7k. And then if you're not up about 5 or 6, why? And then it's pretty damn good. So it feels decent. I mean, the exhaust note's egregious when you start out from cold. It really is. We were fortunate enough to stay in some nice places, and you're conscious that you're in a quiet chateau and you're leaving at 7 o'clock to drive up to Lascaux, or 6 o'clock in the morning to drive up to Lascaux Caves a few hundred miles away, and that there's no way you can turn your car on and not wake everyone else in the chateau, which feels a bit bad. But hey ho. But yeah, no, overall it feels tight. I mean, the nicest driving I did, I suppose, was up in the Pyrenees. Not hugely surprising. There's one of the roads that drives across from Pau down towards the Spanish border, goes up towards a couple of the cols and the Pic de Midi and so forth. And yeah, there's some cracking roads. And I got really lucky with a bit where I just came out and it was all sunny, and I turned left when there was a big queue of people going right, and drove towards Spain for about, 20, 30 miles, and didn't really see anyone. Maybe not that far in distance, but had a good 15, 20 minutes of just really enjoying some lovely, nice, sweeping sort of, if it was in England, A roads, 2 lanes, 1 lane each way, but some reasonable twists and turns and elevation changes and stuff. Some beautiful scenery, like little river down at the side of the road and so forth. Lovely sight lines and stuff. So that was a real sort of gem of a moment. And it likes that sort of thing a lot. And you can make very rapid progress, as you would expect in that sort of car, without really straining it particularly. You can stay below the turbo, really spooling up, and still lope along at an effortless, decent pace. But there is, a noticeable jump up when you ramp above that. I mean, that said, the torque's still available from reasonably mid-range, so it doesn't feel like it's got a sort of rabid top end. And I'm interested in, there's a Litchfield conversion where you can get a larger intercooler and push it up to the same sort of horsepower as on the competition. So it'll go up from like 370 to the 410-ish, something like that. and they do a tune with the exhaust to map it out properly. I'd be quite interested in that in a little bit of time, I think, because there's clearly more you can get from the top end of that car, as proved by the competition and the other ones that came afterwards. But yeah, it looks nice. It's carried all the luggage pretty well. So yeah, we'll see. I still don't feel I know it properly. I'm going to see if I can squeeze it into a track day at Thruxton before the end of the year if we get some nice, if the weather holds out, because it's just not very far away, and then have a bit more of a feel of it at decent speeds. Because again, I mean, on the road you can't really give it, well, you shouldn't be giving it anywhere near what it can deliver. So you don't really get a proper feel for what it's like. Even getting to the limits of traction on second gear corners and so forth, you're still at points where it's too fast. You shouldn't be doing that sort of speed on the road, kind of thing. And if so, it's so. Yeah, I think it'll be fun to take it on track and see what it delivers there as well. So yeah, no, early indications are good. I mean, I will say as a slight downside to the upside that the experience of buying used approved didn't really improve the car. There's about 3 things wrong with it. I won't bore you. Well, I can bore you with the reversing. In the proximity warning doesn't turn off when you pull it out of reverse and put it into first gear. You have to turn the car off and on to stop the fucking thing beeping, which is quite annoying. The map update that I bought for about 80 quid or whatever it was to have up-to-date maps before I went to Europe won't install. So that was quite annoying. And it's got worse aircon. When it arrived, I was thinking, oh look, it's the aircon's so cold that you can almost see like cold mist coming out of the vents. And I thought, that feels suspicious. Like that they've overgassed it or something, because the aircon's actually not very good. And yeah, it's got basically slowly worse over the period of the holiday. And if you set it at sort of 21 or 22, it just doesn't get there on a hot day. It just stays like going really high and carrying on forever and never makes it to that temperature, which feels pretty shit when my wife's Fiesta ST will do that comfortably. So I'm suspicious that there might be a reason why that dealership didn't want to do that work. I mean, look, maybe it's just got a leak, but I feel that it might be one of those ones where they need to take the front of the engine off or something to get to the AC compressor, and it's that sort of ball ache of a job. So it's easier for someone else to do it under warranty from the BMW dealership. So maybe I'm just a suspicious bastard.
Finding an air conditioning leak like that, which it sounds like what you've got, finding that, what a pain in the bottom that's going to be.
Well, I mean, I've got 12 months BMW warranty because it's used approved, which is what I bought from the dealer, and I've got the extended upgraded warranty on it as well. So unlucky boys, give me a spare car while you fix it.
Well, that would seem to be, in the case of the air conditioning, something that I would look for them to do. Does it feel meaningfully faster than your Nissan had what
307.
307. So does it feel meaningfully faster than that?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's. I mean, yeah, I think the Nissan's 5.5 to 60, and that's with the SMG box. I think it's 4.5. I think with the manual, it's like 4.7 to 60. So it's pretty pokey, and it's very fast. It was interesting that Angie's a pretty good wingman for a wag. An awful way to say. But she's pretty savvy with the old overtaking and seeing ahead and judging gaps for me to be able to overtake on French roads, because obviously you're driving from the gutter in your right-hand drive car. She's pretty good at that, but it took her a while to sort of get up to speed from the shift from 276 to 370 in terms of the available sort of point and squirt and nab gaps. There was much more potential for overtaking with less requirement for perceived distance to oncoming collision. Yeah. So that was good fun. It was funny actually. I drove it back from Colchester just tootling around on a sort of Friday or Monday afternoon, whatever it was. And then I took her out that evening just to go down to the pub. And two people on the way down there, some guy trimming his hedge. I was a bit fruity through the. He lives in a little village down. There's some lanes between us and him, and there's about 6 houses before another lane by the garden centre and the pub. And he was trimming his hedge, and I'd obviously been giving it a bit of a footfall for the missus, with it in sport mode, so it was giving it the full trombone. As I came around the corner, he'd stopped trimming the hedge and was like looking down the lane to see who was coming. And as I drove past him, he gave me the little sort of like divers, like nice, as I came past. And then some old gimmer like nodded appreciatively as we drove past as well. And Angie was like, "Are you telling me that this new car you've got, 2 people have just given you the thumbs up on the way to the pub?" And it does feel a bit more. I mean, like, that lad I know who had the Lamborghini until recently. It's a sort of sniff of his world in the sense that, wherever you go in that sort of car, everyone's looking at you. It's like you're walking around with an absolute supermodel on your arm. I mean, it's that sort of level of consciousness. I'm not there at all, but it did feel like a guy at a French garage said to Angie, like, "Ton votre car est voiture parfait," like, kind of thing, as she was like trying to use the loo in there. So you do get more notice in it, and I wasn't necessarily quite after that at all, which is part of the reason I went for an M2, because it's a sort of chunked up 2 Series. It's just a 2 Series. There's not a lot to see. I mean, the fact it's got 4 exhausts and punched out M badges all over the show, I can sort of ignore that. And most punters do, but it's still, I suppose I can't claim to be too shy of retiring given I painted the wheels gold. But although, again, the wheels gold, that's not the gold that I asked for. I asked for frozen gold. And what they've done is lazily painted over the gloss black in a couple of coats of frozen gold. They've gone, "Oh, you've got that sort of weird bronze colour. Well, it looks quite cool. You can have that." Which, in theory, is fine. But when you inevitably scuff them, you can't buy a rattle can of frozen gold to fix the bit because it's not the right colour. So you're never going to be able to repaint them to that colour. So I'm going to have when one's got a bit of a nick, I'm going to need to get them all repainted to the colour I asked for in the first place. Otherwise, they're going to look bad-ended. So there is a difference.
Yeah, I would. With that issue with them painting painting frozen gold wheels over the black and not stripping the black back, and now you being in this position where, because you damaged one, you can't just repaint that one, you have to repaint all 4. I feel your best recourse is to have a conversation with the dealer and explain to them that in a reasonable way, and then try and get them to cover some of the cost of doing the job properly. Because you don't need to rub their face in the fact that it's their fault that you're in this position. And you only recently purchased the car. It's not like you bought it 6 months ago. You only just bought it. Now,
it's going to go back in for the other things to be fixed on it anyway. We'll see. I mean, I suspect they'll be reasonable about it, but I mean, all the stuff that's wrong with it, I think they'll fix. I don't think they'll meet me halfway on the price for that. I mean, like, I was the one that damaged the wheel, to be fair. Let's not mess about. So that'll probably be their excuse, and probably justifiably. It's just slightly annoying that I haven't got an easy recourse to a fix because of the route they took, which was a bit of a lazy shortcut. So there you are. But still, look, big picture, do I like the car? Yep, very much so. And it was nice being in Macron's price-governed petrol universe of France, where it's cheaper there because he's put a cap on the fuel prices. So 98 RON was about 10% cheaper than it would be over here, even if you were buying it from the payage services.
Nice. Didn't know that about the French fuel cap holding prices down there. So the next item on the agenda: automatic stop-start systems.
That's another thing that doesn't work on the BMW.
Well, good. I spent some time in a pub with a man from Birmingham who worked for the post office, who was a postman, and he said that these vans that have the automatic stop start, it just destroys the vehicles because the thing's stopping and starting all the time. So by the time it's done about 150,000 miles, the thing's turned on and switched off so many times that all of those components, everything associated with the stopping and starting, is worn out.
Well, they're going to ban all that stuff soon anyway, aren't they? Because it's all going to be electric cars sooner or later. So that gets rid of that problem. But they do need to fix the infrastructure problem in terms of charging stations before they're able actually to achieve that.
Yeah, and how long do cars last in Britain? I mean, in California, when I was learning to be a smog tech, my understanding was that any law passed in Sacramento, would take 18 years to penetrate 80% of California's fleet. So,
Believe that.
in other words, you can say no more gas powered cars being made today, right today, and it would still be 2034 before 80% on the cars on the road were electric. If you so what we're saying is there's still going to be many gas powered cars around in 2045 by that measure if Gavin Newsom, bans cars as he said he was going to, or as the California legislature is meant to do in 2035.
Mm. Yeah.
But the actual stop start systems themselves, I feel that I suppose they're part of they're related to these problems with diesel particulate filters that people are having with big diesel trucks, because these big diesel trucks have these DPF systems on them and the canisters get blocked up. You have to replace them. And if you don't, eventually they clog up and stop the truck altogether. So, well, basically, all the trucks that have higher miles on them have just had this DPF delete, because the trucks themselves will do like 500,000 miles. And if it's your job working as like a car hauler, you're going to do like 200,000 miles in a year. Well, that would mean every 3 months you were having a DPF thing done. So they just delete them. Then the engines make way more power. There's actually court cases where the people who sell these delete kits are being taken to court by the EPA just at the moment. I'm sure if we Google around, we would find those kind of stories. But yeah, all emission systems make the mechanics of just making cars work much harder, and it all looks to people who just have to make a living with these kind of tools like society's conspiring against them. And I get the environmental angle, but it's tiring. And the automatic stop start thing, I fear, is another one of those kind of things.
Mm. I
I,
mean, look,
I'm
I can see the well-meaning attitude, but like, if it's smashing the cars up quicker, then you struggle to then make the justify the other savings, don't you?
I'm reminded of that grey Sierra that you had that also had an automatic stop, but it was like Greep's half bulimia, where you eat all the food and then don't throw up. This is the same thing. Your Sierra used to have automatic stop and not start, wouldn't it? For a
Yeah,
long while in the winter there.
really good at that.
Yeah, it would you needed to be in the throttle for it to idle, so you needed bloody 3 feet every time you were approaching a roundabout or sitting in traffic, especially if you were on a little incline.
Yeah.
The Mitsubishi Mirage, right? This is the winner of the John Summers Award for the single cheapest addition to any vehicle for sale in the United States of America. Because if you are looking at the rear of a Mitsubishi Mirage, you will see a square, a camera tacked on to the trunk lid, which must be the backing up camera, right? And it's clear to me that the conversation went something in the product planning team, went something like, we've got to have a backup camera to be sales, saying, we've got to have a backup camera to be competitive. The Mitsubishi Mirage must have a backup camera. We're losing sales because you don't have a backup camera. And the accountants went, well, we're not giving you any more money for the backup camera. And the salespeople went, we've got to have one. And they both went to the engineers. What's the cheapest way we can get a backup camera? And the engineers went, well, you can drill a hole in the trunk and tack one in. And, for an extra 3 cents, we can spray it body color. And nobody in the room said, but that will look absolutely terrible. It will look worse than if you bought your own kit from an auto factor store and installed it on the car. Nobody said that. And they went ahead with this grotesque camera on the trunk lid. And I was following somebody with one the other day, and I thought, if I said this to the owner, they would be confused. They bought a cheap car, and their cheap car had a backup camera. And I realized that what I perceived as ugliness, in fact, was design minimalism, even design excellence, because a Mitsubishi Mirage buyer does not covet a camera which has been expensively hidden. He or she is happy merely with the functionality of being able to reverse and the basic functional transport that a Mitsubishi Mirage provides.
Does look like a sort of slightly misplaced arsehole.
Yeah.
Like when cats walk away
like
from you.
Whole car's a bit like that, really.
Yeah.
A
little bit. Took me a while to find that picture, but yeah, no, it does look weird. It very much does look like one past with a bit of blue tack and gone, yeah,
so these few questions, sort of quick fire questions I've got at the end here. What's your favourite YouTube channel at the moment?
North Dakota Yak Angler. So, well, that yak as in kayak. It's a guy in North Dakota who goes fishing in his kayak, and he fishes for like smallmouth bass and largemouth bass, and he doesn't do any whooping or hollering, and he catches them and goes, "Oh, it's a beautiful fish, and they're really nice. Oh, it's a good fight. Really got the adrenaline going," and he lets it go really quickly. He's just a really chilled out ASMR guy. About he just loves his fishing, and he goes along, and they're about 10 minutes long. And he's really good at fishing, and it's a nice relaxing way to spend sort of 10 or 15 minutes during the day. And he uploads about once a week, and you go, oh, yeah, cool, and just watch a bit of that. He might catch a big pike or something like that. Wow, and then carry on. It's nice, chilled out 10 minutes.
I was going to say I didn't realise fishing was a spectator sport, but then I remember that vacation that we took to Scotland many, many years ago, where you fished and I sat on the bank and read a book about mysteries of Scotland or something, if I recall correctly. But I didn't fish. It was a spectator sport for me, so all right. So my favourite YouTube channel at the moment is this Chops Garage guy, this guy down in Barnstaple in North Devon there, buying and selling $5,000 cars, trying to do it honestly and just showing you how it's not the used car trade is not dishonest because people set out to be dishonest. It's because more often than not, the customers are dishonest, or there's just a misunderstanding around what's involved to actually make a car, usable and sound and so on. So, yeah, just an interesting learning for me. What's your favourite car at the moment?
What on sale at the moment?
Say, what we talked about recently. of the moment. It's a totally spontaneous thing.
I've been enjoying the Mrs. Fiesta ST at the moment. I've been driving that since I got back. It's great. I mean, it looks great. It's a little pugnacious little. We've been considering keeping it when we moved to France, and therefore having it at home, not selling it because we own it and I love it. I don't want to get rid of it. And then when we come back to the UK, just keep it in storage. And when we come back to the UK, we can use it.
I drove my Fiesta ST over to Copperopolis yesterday. When I checked the oil at Copperopolis, the temperature on the gauge was 104 degrees and it was too hot to touch the hood. Like literally, I was like, to touching the hood. It was so hot. Such a fun little car on twisty roads like that. So not a freeway car. The suspension's so hard. Like I was like, have these wheels squared off? Because I'd not driven it for a little bit there. But no, what a marvelous little car. Love the Fiesta ST. But actually, my favourite car at the moment is that E55. I've driven that really since I got back over the summer. So 2002. I used it throughout Pebble. Did 1,000 miles on through Pebble Week, going backwards and forwards and doing different stuff when I was around there. And I just love how that car drives. In a previous podcast we talked about the Western Automotive Journalist event, and I drove an AMG GT53 there. That car did not impress me. It was not the same car as mine. I preferred my old E55 to the modern E53. Hang on a minute. Hello, Dana.
Hi, I need a back consultation quickly.
Okay.
Okay, so I know he wants the Louisville Slugger, which is like a brand of bat, but they only have that one in like 26 inch, which is the T-ball. It says T-ball on it, so I think he's going to reject it. Like, yeah. I don't think he's going to be happy with it.
Yeah.
But they do have the Rollins, which is, his brand of glove and everything else, that is, it says Pro Model 28 inch.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
We need to order a Louisville Slugger in a longer length or go somewhere else.
Okay, let me look online and see if it comes that way.
Yeah, online you can order them in each of in 26, 27 or 28 inch for about $30 or $40.
Yeah, that's about the price here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you can order a Louisville Slugger?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you do that and print it out, and we'll give it from Granny and Granddad, and we'll just order it.
Okay.
That's what he really wants.
Okay. Yeah, I know that's what he really wants. Yeah. He's not going to want he's got to have the Louisville Slugger.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Can you do that then? Because I just raced over here, and now I have to go get my hair cut.
Okay.
But can you do it and like print it?
Yeah. I'm still recording the pod at the moment.
Okay, sorry. Is there anything else your parents would want me to get him from here? I'm sure he would want like a baseball backpack or something, but
no, don't worry about that. They were like, we feel like the bat's not enough, and I was like, no, I feel like it is because it's so important to Ollie.
Yeah, he really wants it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna get out of here then.
All right.
Okay, love you.
I love you, Dana. Bye.
Bye.
So, what's your favorite bike right now?
That's a good question. I watched an old 44 Teeth video where Fagan was taking around that Kawasaki in the gap in between superbike races or something. He took the Kawasaki, was it not the KZ one, the one that they did the 240 horsepower supercharged one, whatever that one was.
H2.
Yeah, H2. He took that round at one of the laps and did a rev bomb going down the straight on it. That thing's a beast. I sort of love how it just OTT is in every way. It's a superb looking cut bike.
It definitely looked the part in Top Gun. In this Top Gun Maverick movie, the bike so looked the part. He rides it without a helmet.
Oh, he's got one of that. I haven't seen that yet.
He rides it without a helmet, of course, but he totally looks the part.
Of course.
Yeah. My favourite bike at the moment is. Do you remember when we were at Goodwood? I picked up the flyer for the Bimotore Tesi H2, and at the time I wasn't sure
Mhm.
about it at all. But I've kept the flyer and I've kept on looking at it, especially the tricolore version.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
really,
yeah, yeah. No, I remember it. Yeah, yeah.
really,
Bit front heavy, but superb. Yeah.
yeah, that at the time I wasn't sure, but at the time I was busy being overwhelmed and cynical about Singer Porsches, which, you know, I just know what a fabulous looking motorcycle, and because this has been sitting on my the flyer's been sitting on my desk, it's been obsessing me. Um, now, um, what are you reading?
Uh, I haven't been reading anything at the moment, to be honest, because I've been writing, and it's the same spare time.
I most recently read an article in Haggerty about this was my morning, toilet reading about how the Countach, and it wasn't what I was thinking was this is the Lamborghini Countach becoming like accepted as a collector car. It never used to be accepted as a collector car. Now it's accepted as a collector car because it's sitting in this magazine. And the previous article was talking about Lincolns and had some quote from Frank Lloyd Wright, the great architect. And then you flip on a few pages and there's artsy photos of Lamborghini Countaches with the doors up. Um, and I just feel that's crazy because even 5 years ago, they were far too Honda Civic Type R. It's ugly with those crazy, silly wings and doors. That was what the Lamborghini Countach was certainly 10 years ago, probably still 5 years ago. And now it's crossed over. So I just thought that was interesting, and perhaps that's the story of Pebble. I said there were loads of supercars at Pebble. Perhaps that's the main story for Pebble. Look at that. We've talked for our time here now, and we never once mentioned what car won Pebble Beach or anything about what you actually saw whilst you were touring around France. Marvelous. Thank you for your time, Mark.
Pleasure.
Take care. Bye.